All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome yet again to our test prep time, 11 a.m. Monday through Friday. A little free lesson regarding strategies that students can use on the SAT, the ACT, even strategies that you can potentially use in school as well. So hopefully you've been finding these beneficial and continue to find these beneficial. So again, every Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. So today what I'm going to be discussing is actually specifically more for the SAT with the reading passage. How students can try and simplify some of these questions and just make them a little bit lot easier to approach, especially when sometimes the readings can be pretty dense, some pretty archaic old language can be a little confusing. It's really kind of a way of simplifying everything in general. This is actually like a perfect complement to both something that we had done last week with my colleague Donald McCarthy had done a wonderful presentation on the fiction passage in general, how to approach it. And this is a complement to that with regards, again, trying to focus on some specific aspects. This is going to focus on the fiction passage as well, though it is definitely going to be approachable and usable for all 5 different passages you will see on the SAT. Additionally, and I will touch base on this later, we're going to be doing another reading passage for our Test Prep Time Plus. That's at 1 p.m. I will be promoting that towards the end of this presentation. That's going to focus specifically on the paired passage, which this kind of leads into to some degree. Let me focus on just, again, one thing I just want to touch base with. Again, we are available for both SAT and ACT tutoring, as well as all subjects that students may be struggling with in school. You simply just need to go to the website, www.methodtestprep.com/online-tutoring, and you'll be able to see all the things that we'll be discussing with regards to, subject tutoring, SAT tutoring, ACT tutoring. And it's definitely important that students definitely focus, take advantage of the time that you have now. It's really important to try and stay focused as best as you possibly can, stay up to date with your skills, so that way, you don't get flooded with all kinds of things that are going to happen, like when we do see the SAT and ACT later in the year. So I'm going to discuss the reading passage, and again, certain things that are really important that students should really be focusing on when it comes to the reading is 3 main things I like to focus on: the theme or the main idea, the tone, and then perspective. So the theme, and that's really important, is you really want to try and make the reading as simple as possible. So what's the overall main idea of the passage? And the one thing that's really important to understand is that we're not focusing on book reports here. It's really just focusing on just the text that students are going to see. We don't care what happened before, we don't care what happens after, we care what happens in that text overall. Again, so you do want to keep it simple, 1 or 2 words for the main idea, or simply a short sentence. We've seen many passages where 1 word suffices, 2 words will cover everything. Sometimes a short sentence will cover everything. And I'm going to give you an example in a couple of seconds. When I say tone, overall, most passages on the SAT are going to lean one direction or the other. Overall, they're going to be positive, or overall, they're going to be negative. It doesn't have to be like something amazing or horrible. It's just going to shade in one direction or another. And that's going to be reflected in the answer choices, which we're going to say. Perspective. From whose point of view is it coming from? Now, for the fiction passage, which is what I'm going to focus on for today, it's usually going to be the main character. Not always. Sometimes it's more than one character, but that's unusual. Usually it's going to be just the one main character that you're going to see, and it's probably going to be coming from that person's perspective. When you get to the non-fiction passages, you're going to see different perspectives from the author. So the author is going to have his or her perspective, and then he or she is going to bring in other people talking about the same subject. And very often it's going to be different. And what's important to understand about that is once we switch perspective, very often the tone is going to change. And that's one interesting thing about the SAT, is that it's very binary in that perspective. So if it's positive for one person, it's very likely going to be negative from the other, or vice versa. And this is especially going to be important with the paired passage again. So just to plug again, the method test prep time plus that we're going to do at 1 p.m. Certainly perspective is really important when it comes to that paired passage, which is what we'll be discussing later today at 1 p.m. So let's take a look at this one passage that we see here. Okay, so if you are going to be looking at this later, if you're not looking at this live, I highly suggest that you kind of pause this so you can take a couple seconds to read this over. But I'm just going to kind of just touch base on a couple of important things with this particular passage. So again, what we want to do is we want to look at the main idea. We want to look at the theme. Okay, so we want to kind of figure out what's going on. What's nice about this particular passage, it's not always going to be this straightforward, but it usually will be relatively straightforward. If we look at this first beginning of the reading, it says, "No man likes to acknowledge that he has made a mistake in the choice of his profession, and every man worthy of the name," and it goes on and on and on. So with this particular passage, and just, spoiler alert, this is pretty much the running theme throughout the entire passage. So basically that first topic sentence, that's nice and straightforward here. So what we have here, if we did read this whole passage, when we do toss this out to students, we say, okay, so nice and simple. What is this passage all about? How can we make it as simple as possible? And that's what we want to kind of focus on. Well, it's all about this guy who doesn't like his job. And that's usually what we get, a guy who doesn't like his job. Okay? And that's really important. Okay, because we want to focus on, keep it simple and kind of focus on that. Okay, and this definitely ties into some things that my colleague was talking about last week. He was talking about conflict and perspective, and all this ties into the same thing. So I highly recommend that you go back and look at that video as well from last week. So again, if we want to then boil it down into the three things, the main idea, the tone, and the perspective, the main idea is all about his job. Nice, simple, one word right there. The tone, overall, is going to be negative, and that will happen. It's not always going to be positive. It certainly will be negative. I would say probably a majority will be positive, but you certainly will see negative passages. And the perspective in this case is coming from the professor. I do always recommend that students do read that initial portion in the reading. It is very important to do that. There have been occasions where the actual answer has been in that intro, so it's definitely important to read that portion. It doesn't happen often, but it has happened. So in this case, to be specific, I'm saying it's coming from the professor's perspective. Overall, as long as you know it's from this guy or this dude or whatever, that's going to be good enough. So if we look at this particular question, we're going to want to look at these answer choices. We kind of want to focus on, hey, which one's going to tie into a guy doesn't like his job? Well, let's take a look at answer choice A. A character describes his dislike for his new job and considers the reason why. Now, this is where you have an answer choice that's literally screaming at you to pick me. Now, very often when the SAT has answer choices that scream at you to pick me, a lot of times there's some sort of trap. But this is not one of them. It ties in too perfectly to all three. So if we look at this, so a character describes his dislike for his new job. So a character, that's our perspective, describes his dislike, that's our negativity, for his new job. Perfect. Ties into all three of what we're looking for. If you look at some of these other answer choices, and again, it's how you want to try and eliminate some wrong answer choices. I'm going to touch base on how process elimination is a very valuable tool with any standardized exam with Scantron. But nonetheless, if you look at how the SAT is going to couch their wrong answers so you know what to look for when the questions get a little bit more challenging. So in answer choice B, if we see two characters employed in the same office become increasingly competitive, right off the bat, once it says two characters, that I'm pretty much going to eliminate. Because again, it's really coming from just our perspective, our professor's perspective. Answer choice C, a young man regrets privately a choice that he defends publicly. Everything is coming from his internal perspective. There is no public defense as far as what's going on. As far as answer choice D, has some positivity. And again, overwhelmingly, if you had time to read the whole passage, you're going to find it's overwhelmingly a negative passage. Doesn't mean there's not some positivity. In fact, we're actually going to see that later in the passage. But for the most part, we should be looking for primarily negative answer choices. So once it says a new employee experiences optimism, then frustration, and then finally despair, we can pretty much, that word optimism is going to make it one that you want to try and run away from. So again, B, C, and D are all going to be various ways as to why they're wrong, but A perfectly ties into what the correct answer is. So let's look at our second question. So the main purpose of the opening sentence of the passage is to, and then we can kind of take a look at some of these answer choices. So if we actually kind of go into, hit the four answer choices, as you can see, B is going to be the correct answer in this case. So we focus on answer choice B. Provide context useful in understanding the narrator's emotional state. So again, it's setting the tone. In this case, it's negative. We don't have the overt negativity in the answer choice that we would like to see, so it does make this question a little bit more challenging. But nonetheless, it is still setting the narrator's emotional state, which we have set up to be negative. Look at answer choice A. There is no controversy. There's nothing really to support the answer choice here. Answer choice C. Notice how it says Edward Crimsworth's plight. We're not focusing on Edward Crimsworth. We don't care about him. We care about our professor. It's coming from his perspective. And answer choice D, I'm going to touch on a different slide. On the next one, it's going to focus on a couple other things that students should be focusing on and also avoiding. But it says contrast the narrator's good intentions. Okay, so right there we've got positivity that we probably should be avoiding with his malicious conduct. Now, malicious, we're going to talk about extreme answers. Extreme answers are going to take a couple of forms, but nonetheless, Obviously, this is going to be a negative passage that we've discussed. However, it's not going to be anything to that extent as far as malicious. Okay, he's not going around slashing the guy's tires as far as we know. Okay, then there's nothing there to support that. So a word like malicious is something you'd want to avoid. So I'm going to expand on that a little bit here. So things that you kind of want to avoid. Okay, extreme answers that I was just touching on. Again, the tone is going to be way too positive or way too negative. We see the word malicious, that's just way too strong. And we're going to see another couple of questions where the tone is just going to be a little too positive or too negative. You're also going to see words that we refer to as degree. So those are limiting words. So you can see words like only, always, never, completely. Words like universally. Sometimes even just the word no. Okay, so we've seen no or none. Okay, very rarely, or if not next to impossible, or in the length of time you see those passages, are you going to see where they can say no, or universally, or always, or never. So you just don't usually see it. You just don't have the time to text where it's going to be a correct answer. So again, those are ones that generally speaking to avoid. You also want to avoid logical answers. Makes sense, but there's really nothing there to support in the text. Okay, the answers sound good, make sense. They're actually probably true. Okay, but there is no text that's going to back up that answer choice. You also want to be very careful of half-right answers. So where part of the answer is correct, but a phrase or sometimes even just a single word is going to make that choice incorrect. So it is extremely important to make sure you always read the full answer choice, because they know that, especially with timed tests, students may be rushing, trying to get to those questions and answers as quickly as possible. They start reading, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. Oh, okay, that kind of works. Oh yeah, I would definitely do that. But there's nothing there to support in the text. So we're going to see a couple of examples with the next question that we're going to see. So during the course of the first paragraph, the narrator's focus shifts from, okay, and we kind of go through a couple of these answer choices here. So A, recollection of past confidence, acknowledgement of present self-doubt. So if we look at that answer choice, we see that word past confidence. Again, confidence is going to be a positive word. I'm pretty much going to want to run away from that. Now, if we look at answer choices B and D, you got to be very careful here, because we start with both of these. Reflection on his expectations of life as a tradesman in answer choice B. That's absolutely true. Answer choice D, evaluation of factors making him unhappy. That's absolutely true as well. That's beautiful. That totally ties into our negativity as well. But we're going to have to go back to the text, and we have to see, okay, as a tradesman, answer choice B, to his desire for another job. Or D, to identification of alternatives. And if we've read the whole passage, we're going to find that there's literally nothing there to support it. At no point in this passage, as logical as it would be, is there at any point is it states that he's looking for another job. Answer choice D, evaluation of factors of making him unhappy, great. Identification of alternatives. At any point is it identifying any alternatives to his current situation. And if you go through the whole passage, it's not there. Some of these questions I like to refer to as like needle in the haystack, because the needle is there. It may be hard to find, but it's there. Okay? And again, if it's a tough question, then again, you just want to possibly just want to try and knock out as many wrong answers as possible. But if we look at answer choice B, look at, say, reflection on his expectations of life as a tradesman to his desire for another job. I'm sorry, answer choice C, generalization about job dissatisfaction to the specific of his own situation. Again, look at that. It's tying into all three that we're looking for. Generalization about job, that's our main idea. Dissatisfaction, that's our negativity. Own situation, again, that ties into our perspective. Ties perfectly into all three. So the next question I just want to talk about, again, is really just more of a tone question. So the references of shade and darkness at the end of the first paragraph mainly have which effect. Again, we want to kind of focus on answer choices that, again, match the tone and then have support in the passage. And for this one, again, I just wanted to mostly point out that A, that tone works perfectly for answer choice A, and B, you see a word like sinister, which means evil. Vocabulary can be a little tricky for some students. We've seen a lot of words where they have a good sense of the word but don't have the full understanding of it. So a word like sinister, most students may know that it's negative, but they just don't really fully understand how negative it actually is. So sinister actually means evil, which would again be just way too extreme in this instance. So though they do not have the vocabulary portion, those sentence completions on the SAT anymore, it is still very important to focus on vocabulary, because again, sometimes those subtle meanings of the words can make a big difference in getting the correct answer. So the next question we're going to focus on is kind of a perspective question. So before it was kind of mostly on tone, now this one is going to be focused on perspective. So again, those three things may not always tie into every question, but many of them, or most, will tie into at least one, and as we've seen, sometimes two or three. So in this case, the passage indicates that Edward's Crimsworth behavior was mainly caused by his. So in this case, again, we want to kind of focus on perspective and tone. If we notice, again, A, in patients with the narrator's high spirits, we know that will be a positive answer, so that's one we probably find incorrect. For the rest of these answer choices, we pretty much have to go to the text so to find out why some of these answer choices are wrong. So in answer choice B, scorn the narrator's humble background, there's a portion in the passage where it talks about his caution, tact, and observation. B, scorn the narrator's humble background, it's directly contradicted by his degree of education. Answer choice C, indignation of the narrator's rash actions, that's going to be contradicted by caution, tact, and observation. But even if they were giving him a hard time, notice that jealousy of the narrator's apparent superiority, if we actually go to the line, it's actually going to be in line 44. So it says, had I been in anything inferior to him, then it's going to show, again, kind of that flip. So if we notice, again, how that binary, we have inferiority versus superiority. Narrator superiority against the Edward Crimsworth's inferiority. And again, we're switching the perspective. Okay, so we're going to get opposite answers there. This next particular one is, even though it is all negative, sometimes you will get positive answers that are going to be correct. Here, if we look at this particular question, I'm actually going to focus again on these. Sometimes you get these best evidence. You need to find the lines that support it. Not going to focus on that in this particular lesson, though we do have lessons on our website. We have lessons that we've done that do focus on these best evidence. So it's definitely a good one to follow up with another time. I will just tell you that this one happens to be D. So if I actually go to the lines where it says 61, it says, I had long ceased to regard Mr. Crimsworth as my brother. Okay, so now look at this. We see that word brother. Hey, well, that's definitely going to be a positive word. Okay, this is definitely one of the trickier questions, if not the hardest question in the entire passage. So I had long ceased to regard Edward Crimsworth as my brother. Again, so that's initially what he thought. So the passage indicates that when the narrator began working for him, so when it started. And again, even this doesn't seem like it, but guess what? This is also a perspective question. Because overall, what's going on with our narrator, overall what we're focusing on is the negativity. But in the beginning, it's a different perspective. He had a different perspective at the time. It's only over time that things got more and more negative. So again, overall it's a negative passage, so that's why you might want to focus on answer choice D, which would definitely be on the right track, thinking of the strategies that way. But again, we always have to answer what the question's asking. So in this case, we're looking for a word that matches the word brother the best. So in this case, that's going to be sympathetic ally. So if I refer to someone as my brother or my sister, my comrade, my boy, or whatever, okay, it's going to tie into the best into sympathetic ally. As close as A and C actually are, here it's where that just happens to be the best answer. Again, we have another ones where we have the word supporting and then the evidence that's based on it. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that the correct answer in this one actually happens to be D for number 10. So we actually focus on those lines, 68 to 74. So it's going to talk about how he's walking in. Really, the focus here is that if you look at line 70, I turned from a general view of my affairs, the particular speculation as to whether my fire would be out. Looking towards the window of my sitting room, I saw no cheery red gleam. So if you weren't sure about the line numbers, or if you're having a little problem backing up, let's tie in our strategies a little bit. Let's focus on our main idea. Let's focus on the positivity or negativity, and let's focus on words that might be too extreme, okay, and the perspective here. So the passage indicates that after a long day of work, narrator sometimes found his living quarters to be, well, look at the word treacherous, okay? Believe it or not, that's going to be a pretty extreme word, okay? There's nothing treacherous about him. He's not, climbing over hot coals or climbing Mount Everest to get to his home. So treacherous is just going to be way too extreme. Intolerable. One thing about SAT with their words is they treat these words very, very literally. Okay, so intolerable, it would mean he literally cannot take it. He's not at a point where he cannot take it. We are not at a point anywhere in the passage where he's quitting his job, he's walking out and never to be seen again. So if we get rid of A and D, because again, they're too extreme, and again, how process of elimination is so valuable. Between B and C, which one ties the best? Which one works the best with our strategies? So between B and C, which one's more negative or from the right perspective or ties into the main idea the best? Certainly B is going to be the best answer because it absolutely totally matches the tone, okay, and it does have the lines that support it, okay, and again, A and D will be too extreme. Okay, so just want to do a little quick wrap up. Again, you do want to focus on those three main things: the main idea, the tone, and the perspective. You do want to try and avoid extreme answers, and again, it does take those two forms, both the tone and the degree. Make sure the answer is supported by the text, okay? Just because the answer sounds good is not necessarily going to be the right answer. The entire answer, and not just some of it, has to support it, okay? Because again, sometimes you're going to see, I've seen answer choices where literally one word makes it incorrect. And again, eliminating all wrong answers is just as good as knowing the right answer. So if you're not sure why the right answer is right there, if you can't find that needle on that haystack, sometimes just knocking out, the answer choices that are incorrect just because the strategies and how the SAT likes to answer their wrong answer choices can make a big difference. And hey, if you knock out one answer, you got a 1 out of 3 shot. That's better than 1 out of 4. Knock out 2, you got a 50-50 shot. Okay, again, that's better than 1 out of 4. Okay, which will be reflected in your score. So, just to wrap it up, as I had mentioned before, we do our test prep time plus at 1 p.m. Every Monday through Friday. This works out well because, again, today we're going to be doing one on the paired passage, where perspective will be extremely important. So kind of give you a little bit of taste this morning, and again, kind of just how the paired passage 1 and passage 2, how they interplay. Again, that tone is going to be extremely important as well because very often they're going to disagree. Not always, but often passage 1 will take one perspective, passage 2 takes the other perspective, often it's opposite, and the interplay is going to be really important. So I highly suggest that you enroll for the $10 Test Prep Time Plus on the paired passage because you can focus on the strategies, and again, those are very tricky for a lot of students, one of the harder ones usually. I do want to mention, at this point, we do expect the ACT to be running. They did just come out with some guidance that, unlike the SAT, who canceled the June 6th exam, ACT just came out and said the June 13th exam is expected to run. We do suggest that we do have our online classes. So wherever you are in the world, if you are going to be taking the ACT, definitely recommend it if at all possible. We do have our online classes. They seem far away. May seems far away. Hopefully it gets here soon so we can all get out and about again. But nonetheless, the May 3rd Sunday class actually starts a week from Sunday, so it is coming up pretty fast. And then we have one that's during the week. That starts Wednesday. It'll be Monday and Wednesday, 8 to 10 p.m., starting the 13th. So they're both 18-hour classes. So the Sunday class is 6 3-hour classes, starting from May 3rd, ending June 7th. And then the weekday class is going to be 9 2-hour classes, running from May 13th to June 10th. Again, you can just go to the website, methodtestprep.com/ACT-test-prep-online, or just go to our main page and you can just click on online classes and you'll find it. Again, I do want to mention our online self-paced program. Again, we've had many students just use our program and have found great success in increasing their score. Again, especially if you're stuck at home, like we like to say, 15 minutes a day and students can improve their score. So we highly recommend the online self-paced program. It is broken down to a nice little checklist where it estimates the time and how long the various tasks will take. Again, students can focus specifically. Hey, if they don't need help on the English, then they can focus specifically on the math. If they don't need help on the reading, then they can focus on the grammar. So maybe that's just the English portion they're not as strong on. And currently, we are giving the discount. So it is currently $99.50 with the discount code of FUTURE, which is 50% off because it is normally $199. And then finally, again, you may not have been aware that the SAT was canceled or that the ACT is at this point still running. So to stay updated on everything that's so fast moving with these days, as far as how the SAT, the ACT, or just schools in general are running, we definitely recommend our blog. So either Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter, you can follow us on all of those. Any or all, whatever you find the best. Okay, again, hopefully helpful. Hopefully you can find a lot of these strategies that we're giving beneficial, and we do highly recommend, again, Test Prep Time Plus, our web program, our online classes, or the variety of options like private tutoring, online, for subject tutoring for SAT and ACT, who can definitely help students improve their score. Have a wonderful day.